In a case that has shocked the Providence community and raised urgent questions about juvenile crime, 4 children between the ages of 11 and 12 are being charged with murder and conspiracy to commit felony assault in connection with the fatal beating of a 51-year-old man on January 19th. The victim, Rony Alonzo, a Guatemalan immigrant who had lived peacefully in the United States for 3 decades, died 4 days after the attack from injuries sustained during what witnesses described as a brutal assault by a group of young people. The case has brought renewed attention to Rhode Island's juvenile justice system, particularly the state's stance on trying minors as adults, a policy that exists in only 23 states nationwide. As the community mourns the loss of a man described by his family as someone who didn't bother anyone and stayed away from problems, many are left wondering how children so young could be involved in such violence and what the appropriate response should be. The victim, Rony Alonzo's journey to America. To understand the full tragedy of this case, one must first understand who Rony Alonzo was. According to his family and those who knew him, Alonzo was the embodiment of the quiet American dream. 30 years ago, he left his home in Guatemala, a country then grappling with civil conflict and economic hardship, and made his way to the United States in search of a better life. Settling in Providence, Rhode Island, Alonzo became part of the city's vibrant Guatemalan community. NBC Boston reports that he was known as a quiet man, someone who kept to himself and worked hard. His sister-in-law painted a picture of a gentle soul when she told reporters, "He was a person who didn't bother anyone, he didn't look for trouble, he stayed away from problems." For 3 decades, Alonzo lived this unassuming life in Providence. He was not someone who drew attention to himself or sought the spotlight. By all accounts, he was simply trying to live peacefully, perhaps sending money back to family in Guatemala, perhaps building a modest life for himself in his adopted country. He represented one of countless immigrants who contribute quietly to the fabric of American communities without fanfare or recognition. The irony is almost unbearable. A man who spent 30 years avoiding trouble would meet his end in a senseless act of violence at the hands of children barely old enough to attend middle school. The events of January 19th began like any other day in Providence. But as evening approached, something terrible unfolded on the streets of Rhode Island's capital city. According to the Providence Police Department, officers responded to a report of an assault. What they discovered when they arrived would set in motion a case that would grip the community and make national headlines. Witnesses at the scene told police they had observed several young people attacking a man. The details of what they saw were disturbing. The witnesses reported that the group of youths knocked Alonzo to the ground, then proceeded to kick and punch him repeatedly. According to Boston.com, this was not a brief altercation, it was a sustained attack. After the beating, the witnesses said the young assailants simply left the scene, leaving Alonzo injured on the ground. Emergency medical personnel arrived and transported the 51-year-old to a local hospital. The extent of his injuries was immediately concerning to medical staff. Alonzo had sustained serious trauma from the assault, and doctors began working to stabilize him. At this point, no one could have known with certainty whether he would survive, but the severity of the attack made the outcome uncertain. Meanwhile, Providence police detectives began their investigation immediately. They knew time was of the essence in identifying the suspects. In modern police work, video evidence has become an invaluable tool, and the detectives began what is known as video canvassing, systematically reviewing footage from security cameras in the area surrounding the assault. The video canvassing proved crucial to the investigation. Detectives worked through the night of January 19th and into January 20th, reviewing footage from multiple sources. What they found must have been both surprising and disturbing. The individuals who appeared to be involved in the brutal assault on Alonzo were not adults or even teenagers, but children. By January 20th, just one day after the attack, police had located 4 suspects through their video evidence. The ages of these suspects would shock the community. 3 of the 4 children were 12 years old, and 1 was only 11. These were children who, in a typical middle school, would be in 6th or 7th grade. They were young enough that most states wouldn't even allow them to be home alone for extended periods, yet they stood accused of a vicious assault. According to Yahoo News reports, 3 of the 4 children were initially taken into custody not for the assault on Alonzo, but for a separate incident. They had allegedly been throwing rocks at cars. It's unclear whether this rock throwing occurred before or after the assault on Alonzo, or whether police initially connected the 2 incidents. What is clear is that once these 3 children were in custody, the investigation took a significant turn. With 3 of the 4 suspects in custody on January 20th, Providence police detectives faced the delicate task of interviewing minors about a serious crime. These interviews require special protocols. Juveniles have different rights and protections than adults, and the presence of parents or guardians is typically required. According to police reports, during these interviews, the children allegedly admitted to their roles in the assault on Rony Alonzo. The nature and extent of these admissions have not been made public in detail, but they were apparently sufficient for police to file charges. Based on the children's statements and the evidence gathered, all 3 were charged with felony assault and conspiracy to commit felony assault. The 4th suspect, meanwhile, remained at large, but not for long. Using information gathered from the interviews and additional investigative work, police identified this final member of the group. A warrant was executed, and the 4th child, also 12 years old, was apprehended and taken into custody. At this point in the investigation, on January 20th and in the days immediately following, the charges were serious but not unprecedented: felony assault and conspiracy. These were grave charges for children so young, but Rony Alonzo was still alive, still fighting for his life in the hospital. The situation was about to become even more tragic. 4 days after the assault, on January 23rd, Rony Alonzo succumbed to his injuries. The Providence Police Department made the solemn announcement: the 51-year-old Guatemalan immigrant had died. His 3 decades in America, his quiet life, his efforts to stay away from trouble, all of it had ended because of a violent encounter with a group of children young enough to be his grandchildren. The medical examiner's office conducted an autopsy to determine the official cause of death. Their conclusion was unambiguous: blunt force trauma. The kicks and punches that witnesses had seen, the sustained beating that Alonzo had endured, had caused injuries severe enough to end his life. This was not a case where an underlying health condition or a subsequent medical complication could be blamed. The violence itself had been lethal. With Alonzo's death, the legal situation for the 4 children changed dramatically. What had been felony assault charges were now upgraded to murder. The children, 11 and 12 years old, now faced one of the most serious charges in the criminal justice system. They were also still charged with conspiracy to commit felony assault, the original charge stemming from what appeared to be a coordinated attack. According to the Providence Police Department and reports from Boston.com, 2 of the children were arraigned in family court on January 27th, 8 days after the assault and 4 days after Alonzo's death. The other 2 children were awaiting their arraignments as of the time of initial reports. True to protocols surrounding juvenile offenders, the names of all 4 children have not been released to the public. The juvenile justice system operates on fundamentally different principles than the adult criminal system, with a greater emphasis on rehabilitation and privacy for young offenders. Whether these children will remain in the juvenile system or potentially be tried as adults remains one of the central questions of the case. The family court arraignments represent just the beginning of what will likely be a lengthy and complex legal process. During arraignments, charges are formally presented. Defendants, or in this case their representatives, enter pleas, and initial matters of bail and custody are decided. For these 4 children, the arraignments meant confronting in an official legal setting the reality that they are accused of taking another person's life. The question of how to handle juvenile offenders charged with serious crimes is one of the most challenging issues in American criminal justice. Different states have adopted vastly different approaches, and Rhode Island's system is noteworthy for being among the most open to trying juveniles as adults. Rhode Island is one of only 23 states in the United States where there is no minimum age for juveniles to be tried as adults in court. However, the process for moving a juvenile case to adult court is not automatic, according to legal experts cited in the coverage. The Office of the Rhode Island Attorney General would need to seek to waive the offenders out of family court within 30 days of their arraignment. This would be a formal motion arguing that the case should be handled in the adult system rather than the juvenile system. The decision of whether to try these children as adults will likely be one of the most contentious aspects of this case. Advocates for keeping them in juvenile court will likely argue that even children who commit terrible acts deserve a chance at rehabilitation, and that the juvenile system is designed precisely for this purpose. Those who favor adult prosecution may argue that the severity of the crime, the taking of an innocent life, demands the more serious consequences available in adult court. One of the most troubling aspects of this case is what remains unknown: the motive. According to WJAR, police have not revealed why these 4 children allegedly attacked Rony Alonzo. This absence of explanation makes the crime even more difficult for the community to process. Was this a robbery attempt gone wrong, a gang initiation, a random act of violence born from boredom or peer pressure? Did the children know Alonzo, or was he simply in the wrong place at the wrong time? These questions remain unanswered, and they may remain unanswered for some time. Juvenile crime experts might point to various factors that can lead young people to violence: exposure to violence in their own homes or communities, lack of supervision, peer pressure, mental health issues, or the impulsive decision-making that characterizes young adolescents whose brains are still developing. While the legal system grinds forward with arraignments and potential trials, Rony Alonzo's family is left to grapple with their grief and try to make sense of a senseless loss. A GoFundMe campaign was set up by Alonzo's family to cover funeral expenses and to bring his body back to Guatemala, a final journey to the homeland he had left 30 decades earlier in search of a better life. It's a reminder that for many immigrants, America is a place of opportunity and work, but home, in the deepest sense, never entirely shifts. The Providence community has been left reeling from this case. The combination of an apparently motiveless killing, an innocent victim, and such young perpetrators creates a perfect storm of shock and soul-searching. Parents of children the same age as the accused are likely asking themselves difficult questions. Could my child be capable of something like this? Am I doing enough to supervise and guide my children? What influences are shaping young people in our community that could lead to such violence? These are not easy questions, and they don't have easy answers. There's also the question of how the community should view these 4 children. Are they monsters who deserve the harshest punishment available? Are they themselves victims of their circumstances, their upbringing, their environment, who deserve compassion and a chance at rehabilitation? The answer, as with most complex moral questions, likely lies somewhere in the uncomfortable middle ground. The investigation continues, and the legal process is just beginning. As it unfolds, we can only hope that it will ultimately provide some measure of justice for Rony Alonzo, some accountability for those responsible for his death, and some lessons that might prevent similar tragedies in the future. But for now, all we have is grief, for a life cut short, for childhoods corrupted by violence, and for a community trying to make sense of the senseless.